Good afternoon, all of you. So, we have discussed the latest amendment in the Forest Conservation Act, and apart from that, we have discussed also the important guidelines that talks about what ecological restoration, even the private entities and NGOs, they can participate in the ecological restoration, but it should be under the purview of what? The state government. Is it okay? And that particular activities of plantation and afforestation, it will be considered as forestry activity. That means what? They do not need to pay any sort of NBB, and apart from that, they do not have to undergo the process of what? Compensatory afforestation. Is it okay? Now, this is a small topic. Just go through it. Not so much important from the perspective of paper. You can see Environmental Accounting on Forest 2025. The Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation Environmental Accounting on Forest 2025 report, okay, makes a paradigm shift in the physical monitoring to economic valuation. For example, we have what? Forest Report 2023. It talks about forest coverage, but now apart from the forest coverage, this particular scheme, it talks about what? Economic valuations. For example, we are getting different sort of economic value from the forest. For example, when you talk about carbon sequestration, carbon dioxide sequestration, for that particular thing, what we have? Green credit. Okay. So, from physical monitoring to what? Economic valuation. As the 8th issue of the environmental account and the first dedicated solely to forest, it utilizes UNSWA framework adopted by India in 2018. This framework integrates ecological data with economic metrics to assess the forest as national capital. That means what? We are getting different sort of values in terms of what? Monetary from the forest itself, and that is being accounted in this report. And for this, we are considering what? Survey report, Forest Survey Report 2023 itself, that is being released by the end of 2024 itself. Okay, the report quantifies the monetary value of the ecosystem services like carbon sequestration and the water purification essential for getting what? India net zero by 2070. It categorizes forest by VDF, very high density forest, middle density forest, and open forest, highlighting that superior canopy density translates to higher economic assets value. This data is vital for what? Green GDP. Obviously, we are getting certain values from the forest. Okay, and apart from those values, we have what? The concept of green GDP. And the concept of green GDP, what we have to see how much carbon dioxide is being sequestered by the particular forest. All this thing is being accounted with in this particular, and this is what, in accordance with the Conference of Party 28, which talks about what? Net zero emission by 2070. Okay, so this is the forest report. Go through this forest report. Okay, पढ़ा होगा सब लोगों ने this forest report. Okay, for example, here you can see the total coverage in the forest cover. We account both the forest as well as the tree cover also. For example, we have how much? 8,27,357 square kilometer. Out of this, 7.15 lakh square kilometer is for forest cover, and apart from that, tree cover is how much? Okay, so in 2021, what was the forest cover? 24.62, and in 2023 report that has been released, what is the forest cover? We have 25.17%. But when you talk about this particular forest cover, we include forest as well as the tree cover itself. Okay, net forest cover is how much? 21.76%, and net tree cover is how much? So we can see that when in 2023 report we have higher growth in terms of your forest cover, it's because of what? Tree cover itself. Okay. Now when you talk about top states with the largest forest cover, area wise, Madhya Pradesh, how much? 77,000 square kilometer. Okay. Arunachal Pradesh, then we have Chhattisgarh. Percentage wise, we have Lakshya. What is the percentage? 91.33. Mizoram 85.34. Andaman, this much. Okay. Area wise, top states with the largest forest cover is how much? Maharashtra. Okay. Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. Just go through it. It's a factual one. Okay. Now this is important. Write down. Abu Dhabi 2025 key resolution IUCN 2026 prelims important. See, when I say this topic is important, we have to see its application part. We have to see its what? Application part. Okay. So here you can see IUCN World Conservation Congress, and this took place in what? Abu Dhabi. And from this we have this key resolution. The first is what? Adoption of Unite for Nature on the path to 2045 20-year strategic vision. Okay, Unite for Nature on the path of this thing. Climate allies. Climate allies means what? Climate friends. Climate friends means what? Those who are responsible for what? Controlling global warming. Those who are responsible for what? Carbon dioxide sequestration. So, while animals formally recognized as agent for nature-based solution, earlier used to consider what? That wild animals, they are the victims of climate change. Earlier, what we have considered that because of climate change, what will happen? Loss of biodiversity means what? A species extinction means what? Here in this particular case, we are considering wild animals as what? Victims. Is it okay? So here in this case, what we are considering? Wild animals as victims. But now we have shifted from this approach and we have shifted towards what? Now we consider what? Wild animals as what? Climate allies. Now we consider wild animals as climate allies. Climate allies means what? Climate friend. Climate friend means what? These wild animals, they can what? Control global warming. They can control climate change. They can go for carbon dioxide sequestration. That means what? They can go for carbon dioxide sequestration. So this is what? A paradigm shift. For example, here you can see this climate allies, ecological role, science presented at the Congress and supported by IFAW, International Fund for Animal Welfare, highlighted that healthy populations of climate heroes, that means what? Climate friends, climate allies, such as whales, elephants, sea otters, drastically enhance carbon dioxide sequestration. For example, the forest elephants help grow carbon-dense trees by thinning out the smaller vegetation. If the smaller vegetations, they are being thinned or they are being removed, ultimately what? That particular soil, it will be nutrient-rich soil and it will be what? Propelling the growth of the dense forest, and that is how it is acting as a what? Climatic heroes. Okay, this is the first. So from this, what? A new question it can be developed, because we think that the wild animals they are the victims, but it is a what? Paradigm shift. Now we are considering that is what? Climatic heroes. So this is one of the important shifts. Now second is what? Fossil fuel phase out. First ever motion advocating for the just phase out adopted. First ever World Summit of Indigenous People of Nature recognize their role in the biodiversity conservation. Okay, so this is what? So World Summit that talks about what? Involvement of indigenous people. So that what? The climatic changes, it can be controlled. Abu Dhabi calls to action to accelerate across 5 keys. First is reaffirming nature as foundation of well-being, strengthening multilateralism, ensuring justice, inclusion, advancing knowledge and innovation, and scaling up resources for nature and climate solution. Is it okay? Now solve this question. Okay. Now, with reference to the Abu Dhabi call to action adopted in the IUCN World Congress 2025, consider the following statement. It introduces a 20-year strategic vision titled Unite for the Nature of the Path of 2045. Statement is correct. For the first time, IUCN resolution explicitly recognized wild animals as climate allies due to the role in carbon dioxide sequestration. This is also correct. Third is it mandates a global moratorium on the environmental release of all synthetic biology products, including self-spreading vaccine. This statement is what? This statement is what? Incorrect. Why? Because obviously, see here, for the purpose of what? Controlling climate, for climate control, for climate control, obviously it talks about what? Synthetic biology. It talks about what? Synthetic biology. It talks about synthetic biology. Suppose, for example, we were discussing that for synthetic biology, even genetic engineering is being considered. Genetic engineering is being considered. Genetic engineering is being considered. Now, for genetic engineering, we have two concepts. One is what? Genetically modified crops. Obviously, suppose we have climate change. We have climate, in that climate change, now it is not feasible. It seems to be difficult to grow what? Indigenous crops. Indigenous crop. Why? Because the nutrients they are depleted, and those indigenous crops they cannot gain productivity. And because of that, we have to think of what? Genetically modified crops. So here we are having, when you talk about the synthetic biology, we have two options. One is what? Genetically modified one, and this is what? Your genetically edited one. Genetically edited one. Is it okay when you talk about the genetically modified one? That means what? Here in this particular case, trans genes are added, foreign genes are added. Is it okay? And this should not be allowed in all the cases. Why? Because it is responsible for cross pollination, and because of cross pollination, what? Your indigenous gene pool will get disturbed. But when you talk about the genetically edited crop, it can be employed. It can be what? Commercially used for the purpose of what? For the purpose of controlling. You're going for carbon sequestration. So this is allowed. All means what? Here in this particular case, we consider this genetically modified also, but genetically modified it should not be, because here what? We have the option of genetically audited one. ठीक है ना? So this statement it will be what? Incorrect. So answer will be what? 1 and 2. Okay. You have got the new PPTs? Is it? Okay. So this is there. Sometimes they see, sometimes no doubt there is a very less possibility, less than 5%. But sometimes these motions can be included. Okay. The two opposing motions were presented. Motion 133 called for a blanket moratorium. Blanket means what? Prohibition on synthetic biology in the wild. That complete all sort of synthetic biology, it should be what? Prohibited. It should not be allowed. But looking at this point, it seems to be very difficult to go for carbon dioxide sequestration using the indigenous method. And if we have the options of if you have the option that genetically edited crops, it can be utilized for the purpose of enhancing the carbon dioxide sequestration, then we can go for it, unless and until it go for your cross pollination. Okay. So the resolution adopted, initiative member approved motion 87, which established the first ever IUCN policy on synthetic biology. The approach, this policy advocates for a precautionary approach and case-by-case assessment. It acknowledges that while synthetic biology like gene drive for invasive species control, we have discussed about the gene drive technology in science and technology, carries risk, but it may also provide bold solution for species that traditional conservation cannot save. For example, there are certain species that are on the verge of extinction. Now those species, it can be saved with the help of gene drive technology. So it should be what? Promoted. So instead of motion, for example, that means what we have adopted motion 87. In the questions, motion 133, it can be included. The statement kya ho jayega? Because nobody will study these motions. But I said 3 to 4% possibility exists. Okay. Other question? D. See, the Abu Dhabi 2025 resolution emphasized the right-based approach to conservation. Right-based approach to conservation means what? Here we are considering two things. That means what? Wild animals, they have been considered climate allies. That means what? That promotes what? Carbon dioxide sequestration. Apart from that, right of the indigenous people, they have also been considered for the purpose of conservation. So when you go to the statement number 2, moving from the model of consultation to one of genuine co-creation, where they have inherent decision-making power as custodians. That is what you're talking about, the indigenous tribal people. Okay. Now, when you go through IUCN organization profile, it was founded in 1948, world largest and the most diverse environmental network. It is basically responsible to see the biological and biodiversity conservation. Okay, for example, when you talk about the red data book, whether the species they are in the extinct category, extinct in the wild category, critically. Okay, so ultimately these are being prepared by the IUCN itself. So membership 1,400 plus member states, NGO research institutions. So India is also a member. Now member assembly highest body, it meets after every 4 years. What is the mission? To influence, encourage, assist societies throughout the world to conserve nature and ensure that any use of the natural resources is equitable and ecologically sustainable. The IUCN Red List of Threatened Species is the world's most comprehensive information source on the extinction list of species. It covers 1,72,600 species with more than 48,000 species threatened with extinction. So when you talk about the red data, IUCN Red List. Red List is what? Red List. Red means what? Red means what? Red means what? Red is a sign of danger. Red is a sign of danger. Danger means what? Here we are particularly concerned with those species that are on the verge of extinction. Okay, here species. Here what? Those species. Their priorities species are concerned that are on the verge of extinction. Is it okay? That means what? Here we are concerned, not the name itself indicates that we are not concerned with what? Recovery program. Rather we are concerned with what? Extinction. And because of this, India, it has moved from red list to what? Green list. To what? Green status. Okay. Now we are trying to see how far we have shifted from red to your green status. That means what? If certain species they are on the verge of extinction with the different recovery initiatives by the government, whether they have recovered or not. Okay, and because of that, we have talking about the IUCN green status. Okay, so here what we have: list concerned, near threatened, vulnerable, endangered, critical endangered, extinct in the and finally what? It is extinct. Okay. Now, India's National Red List Roadmap, Vision 2025 to 2030, India unveiled its roadmap to strengthen the nationally coordinated species assessment objective to assess extinction of around 11,000 species. Outcome publication of National Red Data Books for Flora and Fauna by 2030. Nodal agency, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It is being prepared by the Geological Survey of India, Botanical Survey of India in what? Coordination with the IUCN India and the Center for Species Survival. It is now, that means what? India itself is, it is preparing a red book. Again, red book. Red book means what? Here we talks about the extinction of at least 11,000 species. That means what? It is also correlated with the extinction itself. Now, it is aligned with CBD. CBD means what? Convention on Biological Diversity and Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Okay, what is it? Kunming, are you aware of it? Okay, so the red data list, the red data book, it is being prepared. So there, what this particular concept, it is being inherent. So the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework represents a significant commitment by the Philippines to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. So when you talk about this particular framework, it is being by Philippines, okay, and talks about what? The different steps that is being taken for the purpose of what? Containing a biodiversity losses, okay. Aligning with the global effort to protect natural ecosystem, enhance sustainable development, Philippines is a country renowned for its rich biodiversity. ठीक है? Okay. It supports the enhancement of biodiversity monitoring system and promotes the sustainable use of nature resources. That means what, when you talk about this particular framework, talks about more the different initiatives that has to be taken for the purpose of controlling a biodiversity loss. ठीक है ना? It's initiative by Philippines. Okay. Now, 4 overarching global goals. What are the different goals? For example, first, halting human-induced extinction of threatened species and reducing the rate of extinction of all the species tenfold by 2050. Second, sustainable use and management of biodiversity to ensure that nature contributes to people valued and maintained and enhanced. Third, fair sharing of benefits from the utilization of, when you talk about the convention of biological diversity. Is it okay? That means what? Biological resources जो होगा उससे जो भी benefit होगा, it should be what? Equitably shared. Adequate means of implementing GBF will be accessible to the parties, particularly least developed countries and small island developing nations also. So these are the 230 different action targets. Okay. So for example, here you can see, first is what? Land and sea use planning. Second, ecosystem restoration. Third, protect and conserve land. Fourth is what? Active management of species and genetic diversity. That means what? It talks about your conservation of biological diversity. Is it? Okay. Now, are you seeing green status of the species? For example, we have talked about the red status or red list. It talks about that species that are on the verge of extinction. So now we have shifted toward green status. Launched in 2021, the IUCN green status complements the red list by focusing on the recovery progress rather than only extinction risk. So we will see those species that are on the verge of extinction with a different recovery initiative, whether they have recovered or not, whether they have moved from red towards the green or not. Okay, so it provides a green score 0 to 100%, reflecting how close a species is to fully recovery across its range. This framework evaluates conservation success, dependence, future potential, making it an optimistic, forward-looking tool for biodiversity recovery. Key aspects, what are the different aspects? Range occupancy, portion of historical range still occupied, population viability, whether the population are self-sustaining and not at the risk of extinction, ecological functionality, extent to which the species perform their natural ecological roles. If all those things are being recovered, that means what? It has moved to the complete green score of 100%. It is fully recovered. Okay. So here in the green status, this is your red list. Okay. So extinct in the wild. Here what we have? Sorry. This is your, not the comparison. Okay, here we have what? Extinct in the wild, survives only in captivity, critically depleted, persist in a small fragmented areas, fully dependent on conservation. That means what? If there is no conservation, it will get extinct. Okay, largely depleted, limited or localized recovery. That means what? Here you can see that we talks about what? Recovery initiative. We talks about, we do not, in this particular green states, we do not talk about what extinction. They are on the verge of extinction. The population is drastically reduced. Rather, we are emphasizing on the fact that if the proper recovery initiative is being taken, it can what? Improve its green score from 0 to 100%. Okay? Largely depleted, moderately depleted, partial recovery, majorly restoration needed, slightly depleted, near full recovery, fully recovered, restored to the historical levels, non-depleted. Okay? Okay. So, first IUCN green status of species assessment for the tiger. So, for the first time when we talk about the green status, it is being done for the what? Tiger. So, IUCN green status, tiger is what? Panthera tigris. It is critically depleted. Critically depleted means what? It depends upon the conservation. If there is no conservation, that means what? It will get extinct. So remember, this is what classification is what? Critically depleted. This critically depleted is what? It's the green status. It is the green status. Green status, low on green score. 0 to 100%, it is low on what? Green score. Okay. Okay, ठीक है. India's share, how much tiger we have? 23167 tigers, 70% of the world total. Key recovery metrics: conservation legacy, conservation dependence, conservation gain, and recovery potential. Now, significance alignment helps track target 4 of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Do you remember we have discussed the target 4? Okay. That means what? It is correlated to the biological conservation, and that is why we have discussed this Kunming Montreal Global Framework. Just you have to know about this Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It's what? It correlates to biological conservation. It relates to what? Biological convergence. Biodiversity conservation, and particularly what? Goal number 4. Okay? Scientific replaces vague recovery claims with standardized metrics. Initiative motivates government by showcasing success story rather than just threats. Planning direct funding towards species with high recovery potential. Fact: it has high conservation dependence. Without protection in the gear, the population would likely to collapse. No, sorry. I think this statement is what? We have lion population in the gear. Since it is what? Critically depleted, that means what? It is highly high conservation dependent. Okay. It should be pasted over here. Now, Asiatic lion, green assessment. When you talk about protection status, IUCN is what? Endangered sites, Appendix 1, Wildlife Protection, Schedule 1. IUCN releases first green assessment of the lion. It is what? Largely depleted, extinct region, North Africa and Southwest Asia. Conservation success, part of the West and Southern Central Africa, South Africa and India. It is what? Largely depleted. Okay. Go through this. Asiatic lion and African lion, go through the comparisons. So here you can see Asiatic lion census. What is the number of lions? 891 Asiatic lions in India, 30% grown since 2010. In 2010, what was the number of lions? 292. 2020, how much? 674, and presently how much we have? 891. Is it okay? Now here in this is the 16th lion census, and here what we have used? Direct bit verification. Okay. No doubt we are using this technology, direct bit verifications, from 1970 onwards, but it was there into the news. Okay, direct bit verification. So direct bit verification method primarily used for the ascetic line census. It is a scientific approach for wildlife estimation. It is distinguished from the older technique like permark based. Already this question it was being asked. Okay, survey due to the higher accuracy and lower margin. Now when you talk about the direct bit verification means what? Directly we will see the presence of tiger. So direct bit verification method is a highly accurate field-based technique used for the 30 years, primarily to estimate the ascetic land population in Gujarat, India. It involves thousands of trained personnel, including forest officers, volunteers, systematically surveying divided regions, beats to count land based on the direct sighting, their GPS locations, and evidence-based tracking. All these things they are being utilized. Okay, so solve this question. C. Okay. Yes. It serves as a replacement. No, it serves as a what? Complement. Okay, it's complementary to it. This question. C 1 and 2. Predict the maximum plausible recovery that can be achieved in the next 100 years. Okay, that statement is also correct. That is the problems with the magazines. समझ में आया ना? If you go through the magazine, certain concept you'll get it, certain concept it seems to be inherent in nature. अगर मैं suppose if I'll start explaining all those things in every concept, it is being discussed. What is the means need of practicing the questions? Okay. Now, biosphere reserve. What is biosphere reserves? Biosphere reserves. Biosphere reserves. See, when you talk about the biosphere reserves, it is being a little bit concerned with what? For example, biosphere reserve. So for the biosphere reserves, we have men and biosphere reserves. Men and biosphere reserve. That means what? When you talk about the biosphere reserve, the conservation of the biosphere reserve, the conservations of the biosphere reserves, it's what? It is what? In synchronization with the, that means what? For the purpose of conservation of biodiversity or for the conservation of this biosphere reserve, the interaction with the local people is very much important. Interaction with the local people, they are very much, that means what the traditional knowledge are, they are very much important. So whenever we talk about the biosphere reserves, always think of that. When in the biosphere reserve, that means what, when we talk about the biosphere reserves, the interactions, the indigenous tools, the indigenous technical skills of the means of the people living over there, they are seems to be very much important for the conservation. So hamesha we will consider man effort in restoring or in the purpose of conservation of biological biosphere reserves. Hydrosphere, that is, this is not, that is we are talking about hydrosphere, this is biosphere. We'll discuss. I will discuss. ठीक है ना? Okay. So यहाँ biosphere reserves are the special areas on the earth surface, on the earth crust. ठीक है ना? Designated to conserve biodiversity while supporting sustainable development. This is important. That means what? Suppose this is what? Biosphere. Okay. So here, along with the conservation, we consider sustainable development also. So here two things are important. Conservation is obviously it is being considered. conservation, but along with what? Sustainable development. So sustainable development means what? Here men's are involved. That means what? Here protected area coexist with what? Sustainable development. Sustainable develop, that means what? The local people, the indigenous peoples जो रहता है, they are very much, they play a vital role in the conservation of, okay. So sustainable development, they serve as a learning place for the sustainable development, helping study and manage interaction between the people and the nature. That means what? How the interaction of people, they are responsible for the conservation of reserves. ठीक है ना, समझ में आ रहा है आपको? तो यहाँ पे basically we are dealing with what? Interaction of the people in the biosphere. Key features biosphere reserve include terrestrial, marine, and coastal ecosystem. Each site promotes solution reconciling the conservation of the biodiversity with its sustainable use. Biosphere reserves are the government nominated site that remain under national sovereign control, showcasing how people and nature coexist sustainably. This is important. Biosphere means what? Nature and the people, they will exist, they will coexist. Nature and people, they will coexist. Nature, that means what? And it is in the conservation stage, and people, they go for what? Sustainable development. दोनों साथ साथ में एग्जिस्ट करेंगे. नेचर भी एग्जिस्ट कर रहा है और नेचर के साथ में लोग भी एग्जिस्ट कर रहे हैं. ठीक है ना, नेचर का भी ग्रोथ हो रहा है, साथ साथ में लोगों का भी ग्रोथ हो रहा है. Global presence, globally over 26 million people live in the biosphere reserve, covering around 7 million square kilometer. So here you can see okay, for example, this is what? This is the core region. This is what? Core region, and after that what we have? Buffer zone, and what we have? Transition zone. ठीक है ना? So, for example, in the buffer zone, what? Buffer zone, it's what? Ecotourism, agricultural activities are being permitted, grazing activities, they are being permitted. Is it okay? Outside what? We have human settlement. In the transition zone, in the what? Transition zone. Here you can see, already this question is being asked. Core areas, first is your core area, they comprise a strictly protected zone. A strictly protected zone that contributes to the conservation of landscape, ecosystem, species, and genetic variation. So this is what? Protected area. Complete core area is what? It's a protected area. Okay. Now we have buffer zone. They surround or adjoin the core area and are used for activities compatible with the sound ecological practice that reinforce scientific research, monitoring, training, educations. Here what? Grazing, forestry, grazing, agricultural activities, they have been permitted. And when you talk about the tourism, the best term is what? Ecotourism. Ecotourism is what? Tourism that is what? In coherence with the ecological sustainability. Transition area, the transition area is where the communities foster social, cultural, ecologically sustainable economic and human activities. Which is the most protected one? We have different sort of protected reserves, for example, national park, wildlife sanctuaries, tiger reserves, biosphere reserves. Which is the most protected one? Most protected one. सबसे ज़्यादा protection किसको है? National park. Which one? National park. I will discussing tomorrow. ठीक है ना? The complete, for example, here we have seen when you talk about the biosphere, there are different zones. Core, nothing is permitted. Then we have the buffer region. There are certain activities permitted. For example, safaris. Safaris, the development of, just we have discussed that safaris comes under your forestry activity. That means what? If you want to develop it, we no need to carry out the afforestations. Okay, so such thing it can be developed into the buffer region. Even certain form of activities like grazing and certain agricultural activities is permitted. Transition means when you talk about the transition stage, last stage, they are what? Human activities is permitted. Similar things happens in the wildlife sanctuaries also. We have the core and we have the buffer region. But national park, complete national park, it is being treated as a core region. Is a what? Core. That means what? No sort of human activities it is being permitted unless and until it is being allowed. तो सबसे ज्यादा किसका है? प्रोटेक्शन नेशनल पार्क. विल डिस्कस. ठीक है. So we have man and biosphere already. When we talk about the biosphere means what? Nature plus man. That means what? Nature, it is the conservation and man, they interact with the nature, but the interaction, it is what? It talks about the sustainable development. Sustainable development is what? Without harming the ecology. Without harming the ecology. Sustainable in nature. Sustainable means what? From the nature we are getting certain sort of services. We are getting our next to next generation, they will also get the services. That is called your sustainability. ठीक है ना? So Man and Biosphere Program launched by UNESCO in 1971. The Man and Biosphere Program promotes sustainable development through conservation of biodiversity and cultural values. It establishes biosphere reserves as the living laboratories for ecological research, education, and community-based stewardship. Operates through a zoning model, core, buffer, and transition. Encourages integration of traditional knowledge with scientific approaches, adaptive ecosystem. We will see. Already we have seen that throughout the centuries, these local people, the indigenous tribal peoples over there, they are living in that ecosystem without disturbing the ecosystem. That means what? They are sustainable in nature. But along with that, we will try to incorporate some of the scientific interventions. Supports global cooperation via World Network of Biosphere Reserve comprising 700 sites in 134 countries. Okay, so how much biosphere reserves we have? 18. What are those? You know all about it. So these are the different biosphere reserves. Just go through it. We have 18 biosphere reserves. Latest one, which is being added. Okay, so in the UNESCO World Network, UNESCO designated cold desert biosphere reserve in India to the UNESCO World Network of Biosphere Reserve. This is being newly added. So now apart from that, here you can see this statement. South Tome and Principe, South Tome and Principe, Central African island, okay, has become the first state to have its entire territory designated as a biosphere. That means for the complete territory of this island country, it is one considered as. So this can be a factual, okay. Locate it. So what we have to locate its geographical location. Geographical location. Okay. Cold desert biosphere reserves. See, when we talk about now, from the earlier, when we talk about like environment. So earlier, national park, wildlife sanctuaries, this type of questions they were being asked. But the nature of the question, it has been what? Shifted. Now, when you talk about like the environment question that is being asked into the paper, earlier you can see approximately 2014, approximately more than 28 questions were being asked. But the nature of the question, it has been shifted. Remember one thing, now the UPSC is asking what? Applied and integrated question. Whenever you are studying something, you must see what is its application. For example, जितने भी अभी हम टॉपिक्स स्टडी किए हैं, we have to see applications. Forest conservation, this is very much necessary today. Okay, so जहाँ पे applications आपको लगता है कि yes, applications is there in the present world scenario, वहाँ से UPSC will explore the questions, because UPSC is now has shifted from your static based question towards the applied based questions. ठीक है? So protected area cold desert covers Pin Valley National Park, Chandratal and Sarchu and Kibar Wildlife Sanctuary. Biome cold desert biome with harsh climatic conditions. Okay, culture, distinct Buddhist culture over there. Distinct dominates the region with the presence of Gompas, Buddhist monasteries. Choten, remarkable type of stupas. Mani walls, long and thick platforms. Buddhist chanting of Ladakh inscribed at the UNESCO representative list of intangible cultures. And what is the fauna over there? Snow leopard, Himalayan ibex, blue sheep, Himalayan wolf, and golden eagle. Now, human wildlife conflict relief. Right, and this is also important. Okay. Kerala became the first state to introduce amendments aimed at easing procedure for managing dangerous wildlife animals. Is it okay? Now, when you talk about forest and wildlife, forest and wildlife, in the 42nd amendment, they have been what? Under concurrent list. Under concurrent list. Concurrent list means what? Both state and the center, they can enact laws on it. Okay. But suppose if a state enacts laws on these particular things, it has to be approved by the president. Is it okay? President assent is very much important. Clear? Okay. So Kerala become the first state to introduce amendments aimed at easing procedure for managing dangerous wild animals. Now national disaster status, Supreme Court suggested threatening treating human wildlife conflict death as natural disaster. And if a person if he dies of natural disaster, his relative ex gratia, they will receive what? 10 lakh. So it is also being considered as what? National disaster. Okay? You can explore the side effect of it. Okay. Now, Wildlife Protection Act. We have Wildlife Protection Act 1972. When you talk about the national park, wildlife sanctuary, tiger reserves, all those things, they have been developed under this particular Wildlife Protection Act itself. So primary goal, protection of wild animals, birds and plants to ensure ecological and environmental security. Jurisdiction applies to the and territory of India, complete India itself, even the Jammu and Kashmir region there also presently. Constitutional linkage, Article 48, directive principle of state policy, and apart from that, Article 51A, fundamental rights. It talks about the conservation of, it talks about what? Conservation of ecosystem. Key authority, chief wildlife warden. Okay. Now provides for the Wildlife Protection Act. It provides for the declaration of areas as national park, wildlife sanctuaries, conservation reserves, community reserves as the protection of wildlife and their habitat. Prior permission of translocation is required from central government for Schedule 1 animals from a state government to any other wild animal. That means what? Permission of the central government is required if you go for the translocation of these wild animals that belongs to Schedule 1. We'll discuss. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change retains right to revoke the permit if there is a safety issue of mishap. If it feels that there is a safety issue, that means what? If the animals have been translocating, if there is a high chance that they can die in this, then Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they can intervene and they can cancel this. Okay. Now, latest amendment. When you talk about the earlier Wildlife Protection of 1972, there we are having 6 schedules: Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 2, Schedule 4, Schedule 5, and Schedule 6. But presently, how much schedule we have? We have 4 schedule only. Earlier, we have how much? 6 schedule. Schedule 1, 2, Schedule 6. But presently, how much schedule we have? 1 schedule. 4 schedule, sorry. So, Schedule 1. In Schedule 1, what we have? Animal species, and this has what? Highest protection. That means what? Highest protection. Tiger, elephant, guinea bustards, lion, all these are flexive species. Schedule 2, we have animal species. They also have higher protection, but obviously from comparison to the Schedule 1, a bit lesser. Various reptiles, birds, smaller mammals. Schedule 3, plant species. This is important. Whenever we talk about the plant species, they will be under your Schedule 3. Plant species, protected plants. For example, Nila Kurunji. Okay, this belongs to you. Schedule 3. And we have Schedule 4. That is site species, international trade control. Species listed under site appendices. Okay. Now, earlier how much species we have? How much schedules we have? 6. But it's been reduced to 4. The highest protection is for Schedule 1, and when you talk about the Schedule 3, it talks about the protected plant itself. Schedule 4 is for your translocating animals, transboundary movement of animals. Now, prohibits of hunting of any wild animal specified in Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, except as provided under Section 11 to 12. So when you talk about the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, it totally prohibits that the different sort of animals that is being there from Schedule 1 to Schedule 4, they are being prohibited from hunting. They are not being considered as vermin. Vermin means what? If certain animal it is being considered vermin, that means what? You can hunt it. Now, but except as provided as per section 11 and 12. That means what? If something is being given, that means what? When you talk about the vermin, not being presently considered in section 11 to 12. As per section 11 and 12, chief wildlife warden can permit hunting of wild animals under schedule 1 and 2 in certain cases dangerous to human life, disabled, disease beyond recovery, scientific research, scientific management. So this, remember these points. Okay, when you talk about the schedule, when you talk about like sections 11 and 12, there, if chief wildlife warden allows it, then only that particular animal it will be considered vermin. But when it becomes dangerous to the local people, first, suffering from certain disease which it cannot recover, and there is a strong possibility that that particular disease it get transmitted to the other species also. Scientific research and scientific management. Okay. Now, so critical, for example, we have discussed section 11 and 12. For example, we have discussed schedule 1 and schedule 2, highest protection. So they have to be allowed by chief wildlife warden. What is the conditions we have discussed? Dangerous to humans, disease, disable, recovery. Okay. Now hunting others, it will be also decided by the chief wildlife wardens. Threat to crops and property if it is improperly notified. Scientific research, chief wildlife warden, central government. Education, research and population management. Translocation, central government, specifically for schedule 1 species. We'll go through it. We'll discuss this thing. Okay. Now, this is also very much important. Write it down. 2026 prelims. The new biological diversity assess and benefit sharing regulation 2025. Okay. In science and technology, there we have discussed about bioethics policy. Is it okay? Bioethics policy. And apart from that, we have also discussed that this time the budget 2026 it talks about the new initiative that is called Biopharma Shakti initiative. Okay, Biopharma Shakti initiative. Can you recall it? Huh? See, this is the problem. When you talk about the science and technology, when you talk about the environment, please do revise it. Otherwise, what will happen? The things will evaporate and it will be totally escaping from the mind itself. Okay. So bioethics policy. Okay. After that, what? For the promotions and for implementing bioethics policy, this time the government it has passed what your Biopharma Shakti initiative. Now, when you talk about the Biopharma Shakti initiative, now we are slowly and gradually started to, it talks about the development of biologics. Development of biologics. Biologic means what? Now the medicines, earlier the medicines that were being developed using what? API, active pharmaceutical ingredients. Earlier the medicines are presently also, for example, the different salts combinations you are taking. That is nothing, for example, paracetamol and all those things. Kya hai sab? They are API, active pharmaceutical ingredients. They are nothing but the drugs. They are nothing but the salts combinations that are being used for the development of chemical-based drugs. But now there is a concern of antimicrobial resistance. The medicines are not working. Is it okay? And because of that, we have started shifting towards your biologics. Biologic means what? The medicines, they are being developed using biological organisms. Using your biological organisms. For example, we have discussed when you talk about the insulin. Insulin is what? It's a biologic because we develop insulins using what? Recombinant DNA technology. Is it okay? After that, there is a concept of your biosimilars. Just like we have the patented drug, we have your generic drugs. Similarly, when you talk about the biologics, the newer biologics that will be developed, that will be under the patented condition, that will be applicable for 20 years. But when it expires, what will happen? When it expires, what will happen? Development of generic drugs. So for the patented drug, the term is generic drugs. But for the patented biologics, what will happen? Biosimilars. We have to wait for 20 years. Is it? No, it's not like that. There are certain provisions of voluntary licensing and compulsory licensing. The voluntary licensing and compulsory licensing, it will start applicable after 3 years. So we'll start developing your biosimilars. And apart from that, there is another concept of biobetter. That means what? Even the genetically modified organisms, it can be deployed for the purpose of what? Development of biobetters. Biobetter is what? Development from biologics से थोड़ा सा better effectiveness or effectiveness and efficacy. ठीक है. Now we have to correlate. Okay. Context written 2026 prelims important. Context. The National Biodiversity Authority has issued the new Biological Diversity Access and Benefit Sharing Regulation 2025 and modernizing the 2014 guidelines to align with the Biodiversity Act 2022 and global digital trends. Is it? Okay. Core objective and authority. This is very much important. Okay, na? Very much. Put the star over there. Goal: to create a transparent, regulated system for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of India's biological resources and traditional knowledges. Are you getting my point? When you talk about like Biological Diversity Act, 2000 Biodiversity Act 2020, 2002 itself, it talks about what? It talks about that if you are using the biological resources, the benefit that is being derived, it should be shared with the indigenous people. It should be shared with the indigenous people. Okay. So the authority who is responsible, notified by the National Biodiversity Authority. This regulation replaces the 2014 guidelines to provide a more robust enforcement mechanism. Okay. Now what is the workflow? To utilize India's biological wealth, users must follow the specific regulatory path. First is what? Prior informed consent. Any individual or industry intending to access biological resources must provide prior intimations to the NBA, National Biodiversity Authority, for formal approval. Do you think we can find some correlation with the Biopharma Shakti initiative? Obviously, when you talk about the Biopharma Shakti initiative, we talk about the development of biologics. In the biologics, what we will be using? We will be using what? Biological resources. ठीक है ना? Clear? So that means what questions can be developed over there. For example, there's a new industry, and it is trying to develop new form of biologics, new type of biologics that has to be patented. So what happens? Before utilizing that biological resources, ultimately what? Biological resources means what? For example, in certain area there are certain insects. It can be utilized for the development of certain medicines. Consider it. So ultimately what before utilizing it, you need to take the permissions from the National Biodiversity Authority as a what? Prior informed consent. Clear? Second, digital sequence information. This is also important after COVID. Why? Because we have discussed about the genome sequencing. For example, when you talk about the coronavirus, it was having what? When you talk about the core is having the genetic informations. What? Single-stranded RNA. Because of that, it will continuously change. Because of that, it will continuously mutate. And because of that, the government has taken the initiative that they have to frequently go for the genome sequencing, so that what? We can check the newer trends. We can check the newer spike protein that is being developed. And looking at that, we have to see कि government क्या आपका recommendations देता है ना, complete close down or something like that. So we started genome sequencing. Now, for example, we have the different species over here with different insects. We have the different microbes. Now we have carried out what genome sequencing. Genome sequencing किया हुआ ना, for example, Aedes aegypti. Consider it's a particular mosquito. It is responsible for vector-borne disease. Vector-borne disease. Why? Because Aedes aegypti जो है, when you talk about falciparum, protozoa, it can enter over there and it can reside over there. Now, for example, when you talk about like we have gene drive technology, we have a population replacement strategy for the purpose of controlling this vector. But because of that, what will happen? Biodiversity will decrease. Now, can you think of another aspect? The another aspect is what? The mosquito. Obviously, that particular mosquito, in that particular Aedes mosquito, this Plasmodium falciparum, it is been surviving. There must be certain protein, na? There must be certain protein. कुछ तो होगा उसके अंदर में. Because of that particular protozoa, it is been surviving over there. Now we need to identify this protein. How? We need to identify, for example, we have to control this malaria. Ultimately, for controlling this malaria, we have developed the vaccines also. First point. Second is what? We are controlling the vector population also. But think of the another aspect. If you are quite aware of that particular protein in this Aedes aegypti mosquito itself, that makes this particular falciparum survive and sustain over there. Suppose if due to genetic engineering, if due to medicines, if due to biologics, certain medicines, certain vaccines that are being developed, because of it, this protein, they are being utilized. Do you think this Plasmodium falciparum, they can survive? They cannot survive over there. किया जा सकता है ना? So for that thing, what we need? Suppose if you are having the company, if you are having a particular industrial company, what you require? You require the genome sequencing report of what? That particular Aedes aegypti mosquito. चाहिए ना? So that will be what? Your digital sequence information. Digital sequence information. समझ में आ गया? That will be your digital sequence information. UPSC will not be using this word. Certain form of examples applied from it will be there. ठीक है ना? So digital sequence information is a major modern shift. Modern shift means what? We have moved towards the development of biologics. We talk about genome sequencing. Access now includes digital sequence information, the digital representation of genetic resources, DNA, RNA, protein sequence. It's nothing but your genome sequencing. ठीक है ना? It's nothing but your genome sequencing report. Okay. The exceptions: accessing cultivated medicinal plants, specifically those notified under Biological Diversity Act 2002, does not require the prior NBA approval, easing the burden on the traditional herbal industry. This is the exemptions. यहाँ पे आपको जो है, suppose if you are using the herbal plants for the purpose of developing certain medicines, there you do not need what? Prior approval. But if you are using insects, you require it. ठीक है? Okay. Now, when you talk about the Biological Diversity Act, it talks about what? Benefit sharing, equitable benefit sharing. For example, when you talk about the indigenous community, there are certain indigenous communities in the Andhra Pradesh also, Andhra Pradesh, Seshachalam region also. They are using what? Different sort of medicine. They are using different sort of herbs, and they claim that they can control cancer. They claim. We do not have scientific evidence. They claim that they can control your cancers. Is it okay? Now, so obviously, the benefit sharing slab. What is the slab? For example, we have the tax slab. If certain companies using the genetic resources, using biological resources, they develop the medicine and profit हो रहा है, तो it should be shared with the indigenous people. Under what? Biological Diversity Act. So there is a slab up to 5 crore, nil. 10 annual turnover. It's turnover, not the profit. 5 crore to 50 crore, 0.1%. 50 crore to 250 crore, 0.3%. Above 250 crore, 0.6%. देखिए क्या है? Here turnover is written. Why turnover? Because if you talk about the companies, in the company's data, they will show that they have a turnover of 100 crore. But when it comes to the profit, they have to give taxes to the government on the basis of profit. The profit, it will be very much low. Profit, it will always be very much low. And because of that, this turnover, it is being, you see, ये सब कैची वर्ड्स होते हैं. These are what कैची words. If there is no annual profit, people will take. नहीं, गवर्नमेंट बेवकूफ नहीं है ना. ठीक है. Okay. Now, compliance note. Any users with a turnover of exceeding 1 crore is mandated to submit annual resources usage statement to National Biodiversity Authority. It is what? Mandatory. So all these things comes under mandatory provision itself. Okay. High value and specialized usage cases. For example, beyond a standard commercial product, the regulation sets specific high stake benchmark, high value resources for prized species like red senders. Movie बना था ना अभी अल्लाह अर्जुन का, पुष्पा झुकेगा है ना, समथिंग. Species like red senders, अगर वो benefit sharing may be must be 5% of the auctions and purchase value. कितना, how much? It is 5%. Note, if used for commercial purposes, this amount can increase by additional up to 20%. So maximum for your red sender routes. Okay. Intellectual property. If a biological resources leads to a commercialized patent, the user must share up to 1% of the annual sales revenue with NBA. What does it mean? For example, IPR, intellectual property right. For example, is considered in the Secheshalem region itself, there must be certain communities and they are using the herbs, nature-based solution for the purpose of treatment of cancers. It is not scientific evidence, but consider it, that consider a future perspective, that it literally, with different sort of scientific intervention, it has been proved that it is a scientific evidence, that particular method, it can treat cancer. Then what will happen? The company, they will file the patent. So if the patent is being filed, it's become IPR, intellectual property right. Now what? They have to share 1% of their annual sales revenue with the annual sales 1%, not profit. ठीक है ना? Okay. Research transfer for non-IPR. Research transfer, the benefits are determined through mutually agreed terms between the researcher and the NBA. क्योंकि non-IPR है. Non-IPR means what? Intellectual property is not been filed. Not been filed. If intellectual property is not been filed, वो कोई नया medicines नहीं है. नया medicines नहीं होगा तो क्या होगा? Profit margin कम होगा. तो it can be what? Discussed, mutually discussed. Is it okay? Okay. This is Convention on Biological Diversity. We have discussed. The Convention on Biological Diversity provides a global legal framework action on biodiversity, conservation of biodiversity. The Conference of the Parties is the convention's governing body that meets after every 2 years. What is the aim? Conserve biological diversity. First, second, promote sustainable use of component. Sustainable use of component of biological diversity. Second, what? The component that is being used for the development of medicines. The benefits or the revenue that is being generated, it should be shared with the indigenous people. So fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. I do not understand these terms. Fair and equitable. होता है कभी? It's on the paper itself. ठीक है ना? Okay. So for that, what? 2 protocols. First is what? Nagoya Protocol on access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits. It talks about what? Fair and equitable sharing of revenue that is generated with the local people, with the indigenous people over there. Second is what? Cartagena Protocol. Cartagena Protocol on biosafety aims to ensure safe handling, transport, use of living modified organisms resulting from the modern biotechnology that may have adverse effect on the biological diversity. If certain, suppose if there are certain genetically modified organisms, okay, so that particular genetically modified organism, it has to be shifted from one particular region or from the research to the particular area itself. So which Cartagena Protocol it will come into picture. It will see that the regional biodiversity is not being disturbed. We have implementation 3-tier system. One is your National Biodiversity Authority, aims at the central level at the power of a civil court, state biodiversity at the state level, and biodiversity management committee at the local level. So what? It's also 3-tier structure. Importance, ABS related case study. For example, benefit sharing with Kani tribal community of Kerala on developing the Jeevani drug from the Arogya Pacha plant, traditionally used by the tribe for its what? Revitalizing properties. That means what? Already when you talk about this plant, Arogya Pacha plant, already they have been used by the traditional, by the indigenous people over there, but this company, they have developed drugs of it. Obviously, what that company under this Convention of Biological Diversity Act, it should be what distributing the revenue, and because of that, now the government has developed this revenue slab. Okay. Okay. Solve this question. Discuss the questions. I'm giving you 2 minutes. Check it. Discuss among yourself. Go through the statements. Which one? See. Now, with reference to digital sequencing informations we have discussed under the biological diversity ABS access to benefit sharing regulation 2025 consider the following statement. DSI is not explicitly included, directly it is being mentioned over there. That is why explicitly, if it is not mentioned, there is a term called implicitly. Okay, included within the definition of biological resources for the purpose of benefit sharing. Yes, true. Okay, now any Indian entity using digital sequence information for the commercial research is exempted from benefit sharing obligations if they do not access physical specimen. This is what? Wrong. This is incorrect in nature. What? So if we already have those digital sequence information, if we have that report like genome sequencing report, from the genome sequencing report, the different proteins can be developed. Different proteins can be developed. Is it? Now, if the different proteins can be developed, what is the need of exploring those physical specimen? Okay, so definitely if you are using those genome sequencing report, if you are using digital sequence information, we have to pay what? Okay, benefit sharing, it is, so this statement is what? Wrong. The inclusion of DSI in domestic law aligns with the Caliph fund mechanism discussed at conference of party 16. So this statement is also what? True. So it will be your 1 and 3. Okay, this is for your note. Okay. With reference to the institutional and financial provision of 2025 regulations, which of the following statement is correct? The national biodiversity is now permitted to retain 10 to 50% of the collected benefits for administrative expenses. The remaining benefits must be distributed primarily to the local biodiversity management committee for conservation effort. Benefit sharing fund can be used for the general administrative salaries of staff. This thing. Which one? It cannot be used for the staff salaries. They are the government employees, so it's the responsibility of the government to provide the salaries out of consolidated fund of India itself. Is it okay? Government salary. So obviously the money that is being used, it is being utilized for the what? Conservation of biological diversity. Conservation of biological diversity. Is it okay? Because obviously if you are carrying out certain scientific intervention, certain form of biological thing, it will be disturbed. So with the same amount of money, it will be what? We have to carry out the conservation activities. So 1 and 2. Okay. Question number 3. Solve it.